Hello and greetings from UB. On behalf of the Office of Alumni Engagement and the UB School of Management, we are delighted you are able to join us for today's webinar presentation. My name is Christy Fields and I oversee the Alumni Careers and Lifelong Learning program here at UB. We are so grateful you are able to join us today, and we hope you and your family are staying well. It is my honor to welcome today's featured presenter, UB alumna Gwen Appelbaum. Gwen is the Assistant Dean and Director of the UB School of Management's Career Resource Center and has held this position since 2008. Gwen manages strategic planning for graduate and undergraduate career development, internship programs, and recruitment by employer partners. She helps drive school-wide performance as part of leadership committees that address strategic priorities such as MBA admissions, the school's ranking and reputation, and leadership development. In 2017, Gwen was honored with the SUNY Chancellor's Award for Excellence in Professional Service. Prior to Gwen's time at UB, she worked at National Fuel Resources for 11 years. Her roles included Manager of New York Sales and Director of Energy Trading. Prior to that, she served as a financial analyst at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York in New York City. Gwen also currently serves on the Board of Trustees for Buffalo Collegiate Charter School as Vice Chair and previously served as Chair of the Board of Directors for Leadership Buffalo. In today's session, Gwen will share key tips and strategies for successful outreach in a virtual environment and make time to focus on one of your most priceless assets, your network. We will leave some time during today's webinar for Q&A. If you have any questions during the presentation, please just submit them through the GoToWebinar taskbar of the questions section on your screen, and you can chat those to us at any time. In addition, we will be recording today's session, and we will send you all a copy within the next 24 hours. With that said, it's my pleasure to turn it over to today's featured presenter, Gwen Appelbaum.
Hello, everyone. Hello from Buffalo, and hello from UB. I actually popped in the office today, and I hadn't been here in a while, but I want to, I'm so glad to have the chance to talk with you about this important topic of virtual networking. Before I do, though, a couple of things that I just wanted to mention before we get started. First of all, I want to congratulate you on signing up for today. Particularly during these challenging times, I want to congratulate you for signing up and making time for your career development. When I know when it comes to the challenges that we're facing, sometimes it becomes overwhelming and some of the career development pieces of your life get lost. And so signing up for today is a great step in the right direction in terms of looking to make progress in your career and make sure you're taking back some of the control in an environment where we feel like we're losing a lot of control. I've been emphasizing to our graduating students and our alumni that there are so many things that you can be doing to take charge again of your career development, and networking is certainly a big piece of that. I also want to congratulate you from the sense that when it comes to, let's make sure I can look at it. Yes, when it comes to making time for your career development, I work with so many alumni that fall into the pitfall of focusing more as they get into their career on their organization's goals versus their personal goals. And while they may be mutually reinforcing, it's important to do things like this to make sure that you're staying on track and setting and achieving personal goals for yourself. Whether or not it's finding a mentor, whether or not it's becoming a better speaker, whether or not it's joining a board. What are those personal goals that you have for yourself? And make sure you're making time to write those down and achieve those so that the organization's goals don't necessarily take over in terms of your career progress. So the other thing that I want to mention is that someone wise once told me that when you're giving advice or when you're giving a presentation and you're making suggestions to people, don't suggest anything that you wouldn't take on yourself. And I know that may sound obvious, but I can tell you that everything that I'm suggesting today is, all of these things are things that I've needed myself. I started my career, as Christy mentioned, at the Federal Reserve as a financial analyst. And I took the approach of, if I put my head down and work really hard, someone will notice. And maybe that started off working well, but as time goes on, as your career goes on, that doesn't work so well, mainly because for a couple of different reasons. In this day and age, you become siloed, just putting your head down and working. You like to learn from other people. And so the network that you have is the best way that you can help stay on top of career events and opportunities that are relevant for you to continue to learn and grow. And so if you're not going to do that, then you're at a disadvantage for all the other people that are out there that are building strong networks and taking advantage of them. So, I keep that in mind. I've worked on it. I'm still a work in progress. And so let's dive in and talk a little bit about virtual networking, particularly in these uncertain times, because there's definitely, particularly now, some right ways to do things and maybe some not so right ways to do things. And so we'll talk about that. Okay, so why is virtual networking important? Well, for the same reasons that networking is so important. As Christy mentioned, is a priceless asset. And when we think about why it's so priceless, I think about things, and I think about comments like Brene Brown, who in one of the most popular TED Talks that's ever been given, said, "Connection is why we're here. It's what gives us purpose and meaning to our lives." And I think keeping that in mind underneath all of the tips and the strategies that we're talking about today, that it's about the connection and what you mean to other people, the give and take, that's so important to make networking successful. It's not so much about what you're getting out of these relationships. It's not a transaction. It's about the give and the take and the relationships that you're forming. So keeping that thing in mind is important. And you may have come here today knowing, obviously, networking is important, and you may be here today and talking and thinking about how this can help you in terms of getting a job, getting a better job, being a better you, finding your people, or finding other people because you're kind of getting sick of the people that you're with day to day, or you're Zooming with day to day, which I know is happening a lot lately as well. So a way to branch out and try to expand your network. And while networking is so important, and we're normally in an environment where there's so many different ways to do that, and we may feel limited, there's still so much opportunity in the way that we can network even in this virtual environment. And so that's what we'll talk about today. I'm going to lay some ground rules in terms of the way that we think about virtual networking, and it's so important to set us up for success in going forward. And the very first thing that I alluded to before, but I want to make sure that I emphasize, is that networking and virtual networking is about the relationships, not the numbers. So when you think about the fact that the reasons why you may be here and why you may be thinking about it, I think it's important to play the long game and think about the fact that this isn't an overnight solution to a problem. It's a long-term asset to grow and develop. And so I know when we look at the dashboards of the social media that we have, there seems to be a focus on the numbers, but there's actually a great comment, Hall of Fame comment about this whole thing from Seth Godin. Seth Godin, best-selling author, social media marketing guru. And so let's listen just for a couple of minutes to this.
Hi,
you're going to hear this question that's asking about social networking for business.
On social networking for business. Is it valuable for business, yes or no? And if yes, for what types of businesses?
Well, if you've got Facebook, you're probably my friend, because God knows I have enough of them, and it's worthless to you. It's worthless to have lots and lots of friends on Facebook, because they're not really your friends. They're just people who didn't want to offend you by pressing the ignore button. And if you've got 5,000 people following you on Twitter because you tell a dirty joke every couple hours, that's not particularly useful for your business either. That the internet is this giant cocktail party with all these people swarming around, connecting as much as they can because they're keeping score. Who likes me today? Who's talking about me today? But one day when you need to ask them to authorize a $100,000 contract, it doesn't matter. What matters is, where are the real relationships? Now, I have real relationships with thousands of people around the world. There are people I've never met who I could email in New Zealand who would let me sleep in their living room for 3 days if I was in town. Because we've done stuff for each other, because we've exchanged worthwhile ideas, because people have been connected by real things, not just a couple bits lining up. So my answer is, networking is always important when it's real, and it's always a useless distraction when it's fake. What the internet has allowed is an enormous amount of fake networking to take place. And it's so easy to be seduced by it because here's a dashboard and a scoreboard, and look how popular I am. And it's nonsense. That if you're measuring that, it's like measuring hits to your website. It doesn't translate. What translates is, are there people out there who I would go out of my way for, and who would go out of their way for me? That's what you need to keep track of. And the way you get there is by going out of your way for them, and by earning the privilege of one day having that connection be worthwhile.
Okay, so I think that clip is right on the money when it comes to capturing the essence of what is so important about networking and why it works for some people and may not work for others. And so, you know, with all that in mind, I think one of the other ground rules that we're talking about is that you can't wait to build your network until you need it. You need to be proactive about it and building it now for the future, because those relationships take time to cultivate and they take time to identify. And so you want to make sure that you're not looking for the transaction, the immediate gratification, because that will turn you off and will turn other people off to you. And you know, we're all aware of that person that has approached you, and you can tell that they're looking for something. You can tell that there's an ask in there, and so don't let that be you. You want to make sure that you're forming relationships where people have the sense of what you have to offer, and they enjoy supporting and benefiting you. Okay, so so let's look at one strategy that I had read not that long ago. Was an article in Harvard Business Review called "Learn to Love Networking," because some of you may be out there saying, I get it, it's important, but I hate it. And so maybe it takes reframing and finding the way that networking works for you. So many people hate networking events. One of the biggest networking gurus out there, Keith Ferrazzi, who's written a couple of great books. I'm going to actually recommend a few resources at the end that you may want to delve into. And he's got a couple of great books, as I said. And he said he's never attended a networking event. And so does that have to be your strategy? No, of course not. And especially in this day and age. And you might say, do I need to attend an online virtual event? No, there's some other ways that are great ways to be networking and that you may learn to love. And so, but we know that there's so many people out there that don't. And that was evident in this article when the authors talked about the fact that they conducted a little study with 300 people. And they asked those 300 people, they split them up in half. And they said to one half, okay, you think about and write down some instances where you've had to work on your professional networking. Write down some cases where you've needed to do that in order to get ahead in your career. They ask the other people to write down and think about when they've been social networking, just looking to make friends, make connections, and approach networking in that way. And so then after they did that, they had all of those people look at this thing right here. So hold on. Yeah, so they had them fill in these blanks. And when they did, what you can imagine is that the folks that were asked to think about professional networking and getting ahead in their career filled this out with wash and soap. And those that were asked to think about social networking from the sense of making connections, building friendships, building relationships, filled it out as wish and step. And so we want to get you in the right frame of mind so that you're filling out those blanks as wish and step and not wash and soap, and thinking of this as something that's morally and mentally dirty in some way to you. And so what are some of the ways that you can do that? So, and I loved this article in terms of giving you some ideas of ways that you can think about networking that will help. And one of them, first and foremost, is to focus on the learning pieces of it. So, especially in these uncertain times, you don't realize just how siloed that you've become until you start realizing that there's other people out there that are very willing to connect. Some folks even more willing to connect now than ever before because of the fact that they're feeling more siloed, and what you can learn from each other. And so when you focus on the learning piece of it, then it feels less transactional. The other thing, identify common interests. Find your people. Find people that you have commonalities with, and that they can see a little bit of themselves in you. And so that way, that you have this way of wanting to cheer for each other because of some shared interests. And that's important as well. Think broadly about what you can give. So whether or not it's resources that you may have, a connection that you may have, advice that you may be able to give, or even sometimes people say, I don't know what I can give this person because they're a mentor to me and I feel like I tend to take. Well, the best gift that you can give is gratitude. And that's what so many people are looking for these days, particularly in these uncertain times, is knowing that they've made an impact on other people, that they've made a difference. There's a desire for a kind of a shared sense of community that you have, and wanting to know what you are leaving behind. What are you, what kind of impact will you have on other people? And so if you're specific about the ways that you've been grateful for the impact that people have had on you, that is a gift, absolutely. And so finally, finding a higher purpose. Because I guarantee you, if the reason that you're sitting here today, or the reason why, the only reason why that you want to be networking is because you're looking for a job offer, you will be very dissatisfied with this process. So again, it's all about the relationships, finding that higher purpose and networking with purpose. Okay. So how do we get started? So before we get into all the ways that you can be making some outreach and making connections and building your network, take a look at yourself first and realize what you're putting out there and how you're coming across online. I spend a lot of my time talking with students, alumni, professionals about their personal brand. And so ask yourself the question about, is your personal brand coming through online? Are you proud of what people see online? Because these days, what you're putting out in terms of your online image, your digital brand, is most likely the first impression that people will have of you. And we all know how important first impressions are. And so, are you proud of that first impression? If you look at what comes up, and we'll talk about in a few minutes, all the different things that I want you to make sure you're checking in on. Can people see your value? Can people see what you're interested in, what your goals are, what your strengths are? All of those things, is that coming through in your digital brand? Because if they're not, then you have a little bit of work to do before you may want to begin going out and making a ton of connections, and that may start off in a disadvantaged place because you haven't taken the time to do this. So, all right, what can you do? I'm going to focus on, there's so many things that make up your online brand, but just focus on a few key things. First, Google yourself. You've heard it 1,000 times, but so few people do it regularly. Google yourself and just see what comes up. And make sure that you're doing so from a position of not logged in to your different social media. See what others, put yourself in other people's shoes. If they Google you, what's going to come up? And make sure that you're happy with what comes up. Or you might have some work to do in terms of building content that helps people see you in the way you want to be seen. The next thing, web meetings. Especially as we all become exhausted with Zoom meetings and ways that we're meeting over the internet. Still continue to show up. Put your best foot forward. When it comes to meetings, making sure, turn on your camera, be engaged, be prepared. Don't be multitasking and doing other things while you're in a meeting. Show people that you're prepared. Making sure that you're continuing to contribute and add value in these meetings. And if you're exhausted from them, definitely find time to schedule yourself breaks, to not be Zooming all day. I've had a couple of those days myself. They're exhausting, and it doesn't help you put your best foot forward. But just remember, each of those is an isolated meeting where you want to be able to put your best foot forward. So make sure that you've got a great camera image, making sure that you're engaged, that you're asking questions. Like I said, so putting your best foot forward in those meetings is important. Email. One of the greatest thinkers on personal branding, who originated the concept, talks about the fact that you can measure your brand by how quickly people open your email. So give it some thought. If you notice that you're not getting responses to your email, some of it may have to do with the volume of email that's coming through these days because people are resorting to that form of communication quite a bit these days in this virtual environment. But notice if you find that people aren't reading your emails all the way through, or you're not getting responses as you should. Maybe it has something to do with the emails that you're putting out there. It says so much about your brand. Write a concise email. Write something that's quick and to the point. Use the subject line. All of those things that demonstrate your brand, people will appreciate those. And you'll be able to say how you can measure your brand is by how quickly that you get a response. People opening your email is certainly a measure of that. And then finally, there are so many social media platforms. For today, I'm mostly going to focus on LinkedIn as a best tool for professional networking. And so looking at your LinkedIn profile, because other people will certainly be looking at it, is important right now. And taking this time as an opportunity to refresh what you have out there. I thought you might appreciate looking at an example. And I got permission from one of our fabulous alumni, Kim Bazzotti, who has what one of our students referred to who had met Kim said that Kim's LinkedIn profile is quote unquote perfection. And so I had talked to Kim and asked her if she would mind if I showed this, and she said she didn't mind. So here's one example. And there's some things that I say, oh, I need to do this too. Kim has a great profile. And so what are a few things? First of all, she's taken the time to make a customized URL. Everyone has the ability to shorten the URL, especially if you want to put it in your resume. So you can take the time and click on edit your profile and customize your URL and just make it something that's shorter and more personalized to you. So that's one thing. Your picture, have a picture, number one. One of the things in feedback in looking at LinkedIn profiles, people think it's creepy if you don't have a picture actually. So, and smile in it. I happen to like Kim's picture because it's outside and we had the same, if you see mine's kind of the same, along the same lines in terms of the outdoor shot, just because it's a little bit different than the standard profile photo with a blue background, but a professional photo is certainly important. Not one where you can see your arm is cut out and where you're putting your arm around someone else or whether you're fuzzy and in focus or an avatar, any of those things. Making sure that you've got a great picture is important in terms of making a great first impression. And then also using the headline here. And so some of you may use your title as your headline, and that's okay if you think it says enough about you to identify you and what you want people to know about you, but use the opportunity to customize that as Kim did, and talking about, obviously she's focused on brand innovation and equity in terms of for her company. She has her MBA grad year and an MS that she's working on as well. So all the things in a quick, easy way that people will see right away about her to be able to easily identify pieces of her brand. I didn't show her summary profile, but it's very well developed. So making the most of that summary profile, you can take a look at hers and see how you can emphasize key skills, assets, important accomplishments that you've made, all of those things in your summary. And then when you go down to experience, have a well-developed idea about what accomplishments you've made. And you look here, and Kim's even added some specific pieces of evidence of things that she's worked on. So you can see some of the great work as testament to the value that she can bring. And so spend some time with your LinkedIn profile, look at profiles like these. You can stock those that are in your industry and see and get ideas for ways that you can improve your own LinkedIn profile. But Kim's is a great one. The last thing that I'll say about that is, and one of the greatest values of LinkedIn is understanding that the groups that you follow, the companies that you're following, the influencers, to get ideas, you can look at peers, mentors, people that you admire and see who they're following and get ideas for who you should be following, but pay attention and engage when it comes to the groups that you're belonging to, industry groups, professional associations that have groups. And this is where you can really amplify your brand by noticing content that people are putting out there, comment on the content that people are putting out there, like it, and making sure that you're becoming even if you haven't before, taking steps to show your relevance and contributions in this way, because it's a very valuable way to do it, and a very interactive way to do it, and a great way to build connection. Okay, so you've done all this, you've gotten yourself ready to be viewed online, and you've taken some time with all of these things that we just talked about. So where do you start? One great place to start is with your existing network and check in with people. Now, some of you may say, I was just reading an article, someone said, I'm done with checking. I've checked in all the time with the current existing network that I have. Okay, but have you done so with a little bit of purpose? So maybe start with some friends and family, especially in times of uncertainty and challenge. As you start telling your story, there's some emotional aspects to what we're all going through. And so while we're all feeling some of this challenge and difficulty, it's important to say, okay, let me save some of this, the emotion and some of the struggle that I'm going through for my inner circle, and making sure that when I tell the story about me, that I'm telling the story that I want other people to hear in order to be able to have them understand where you want to go, and not necessarily rooted in the place that you are now. And so your friends and family and the network, the existing network you have, is a great opportunity for you to start gaining confidence in telling your story and telling, even you've heard people talk about elevator pitch. It's not just for an interview, it's also in terms of how you introduce yourself. I always say a great definition for elevator pitch is who you are, what you want, and why you deserve to get what you want. And I don't necessarily mean why you deserve to get what you want, meaning you need to brag about who you are and what you've done, but why you deserve to get what you want, meaning what is the connection? What is the shared interest? Tell me a story so that I can see some piece of me and understand what is our connection, what is our shared interests. So, researching and understanding who you're talking with as we talk about getting out and beyond, especially our circle of our existing circle of people we know, will be incredibly important. And the way that you concisely tell your story is so important to the way that you can build the connection and begin to build these relationships. And also your friends and family, it may surprise you how many ideas they have for people that you can talk with. And so that leads me into the next idea of, when you're talking with your existing network, and when I'm talking about your existing network, Keith Ferrazzi, who I mentioned before, said you might not realize just how vast this network is. So you have, and here's a great list of all the people that make up or may make up your existing network: relatives, friends, friends of relatives, spouses, contacts, current colleagues, professional association members, current, former customers and clients, parents of your kids' friends, neighbors, past and present, people you went to school with, people you've worked with in the past, maybe people in your religious congregation, former teachers, people you socialize with, people who provide services to you. There's so many different people in your network that you may not have realized. And so, really tap into that and check in with people too and see how they're doing, because this is a great place to start in terms of your outreach for virtual networking. And then when you want to broaden your horizons and look at other people and really grow that virtual network, make sure you're committing. And so there's a couple of, I've got a few questions here that I know you may be asking in terms of, but okay, who should I be connecting with? And again, let's talk about building on your existing network, but not just getting ideas, but also asking for email introductions. And so maybe you've never done that before, but maybe now is the time to start and asking people that you know to introduce you to those that might be useful to you in different ways, depending upon where you are, whether or not from a professional reason, what you've set your goals, you've thought a little bit about what's important to you in terms of personal brand, as we talked about before. What's your goal? What are your goals? Who you are? What you want? And so making that known to the circle of people that you have now, and say, who else should I be talking with? And then leverage, obviously we're on an alumni call, leverage your alumni network. So whether or not it's through our Career Connector platform, which exists to help an alumni to alumni connections, for student to alumni, alumni to student, it's a marketplace of connections for you that are all of your UB alumni. And so you can give advice and you can get advice. And so it's a perfect platform for this type of virtual networking. And also, of course, LinkedIn searches. Go through your LinkedIn and say, okay, I'm looking for people in this particular city, this particular area. Click on, and I always click on University at Buffalo, as well as maybe the particular school that you graduated from, because sometimes people have different things clicked, and you want to make sure that you're capturing all the people that may be relevant for the particular search that you're conducting. So doing so in that way. I do recommend, if at all possible, that finding an email and reaching out to people via email, because I know the LinkedIn invitations get to be exhausting, but LinkedIn invitations are certainly another option as well. Joining professional associations and groups. And now is the time where, if you want to stay on top of, especially in this rapidly changing environment, the real-time feeds that you can see on the groups, and particularly in terms of LinkedIn, and the communities that professional associations have formed virtually in order to stay current, are incredibly helpful to you to make sure that you're staying on top of industry trends and staying on top of potentially valuable connections that are putting out content that you may want to connect with. And so, and if you're in a place right now where you're conducting a job search, one great resource, if you want to come up with a list of people that may be a great starting point for reaching out to, is the 2-Hour Job Search by Steve Dalton, who writes about the LAMP list. And LAMP is an acronym, and I've got that in the end here in terms, at the end of this presentation, as another resource to helping you kind of put down on paper and really plan out, and making time to approach this systematically, but with authenticity in the process. And so, and the last thing is, don't be afraid to reach out to someone that you admire. There's actually a great article that I was reading about in Harvard Business Review by Dory Clark, who's a wonderful resource on particularly social networking. And if you're not already a subscriber to Harvard Business Review, right now there's so many free resources. Harvard Business Review you can subscribe to and get articles, a certain amount of articles each month. And so maybe you want to start off with subscribing and hitting the topic of networking, because this article will come up in terms of how you can reach out to someone you admire. But in the spirit of this type of environment, I can tell you, I've been reaching out to people that I admire and been very surprised at kind of the speed with which people are getting back, and the fact that how willing people are to help. And I think maybe that says something about the environment we're in. And so you never know what you might get unless you ask. And so reach out to people, even if they're people that may seem out of your reach. The worst that you can get is no response, but it never hurts to try. Okay, so, but how are you reaching out? And I want to emphasize this, completely emphasizing with, I've always talked about with commitment and cultivation, and we'll talk about those. And in this environment, I would add with care. And so when we talk about that, you don't know what is the current circumstance for the person that you're reaching out to. And it shouldn't prevent you from reaching out, but you should acknowledge that in the beginning. And I try, certainly when we're reaching out, I want people to know that I am certainly wishing them well, that I hope that a message finds them in a safe and healthy state. And so taking care to understand that you don't know the current situation of the person that you're reaching out to. So that may impact whether or not you get a response. It shouldn't prevent you from reaching out, but take care when you're reaching out. And certainly, because you don't know how busy someone is, or you don't know what they're going through, taking the time to research before you reach out and understanding the connection and building that into your outreach is even more important than ever. And so, as I said, email is preferable in terms of reaching out to people right now. Especially if you're going to reach out to people that you don't know, write a great email. Write an email that's concise, for sure. I know how much over and over again people say that they appreciate a concise email, but get out that elevator pitch again. Hi, I'm an associate brand manager, and I noticed that you wrote a great article on LinkedIn about how your brand building is being affected at your organization because of COVID-19. And I really appreciated this, this, and this. And I would love to ask you some questions. Would you have a few minutes to connect with me? So full to the point, and you're giving them an understanding of why you're reaching out in that connection, a little bit about who you are, and just that you want to spend a few minutes talking with them. So write a great email that conveys that and shows that you're reaching out with intention and with purpose. And ask for a coffee meeting. We just talked about earlier about the fact that I personally am not a fan of larger scale networking events. I love some of maybe events in particular. I always love our alumni events. Maybe is not even maybe, but as a way of connecting with people that I have a shared affinity with. Sometimes you don't like large scale networking events. You prefer more one-on-one connection. So ask for that coffee meeting or informational interview. And so that is a way that you can establish more of a relationship and can be a first step in building that relationship. But before you enter into that meeting, you've landed that meeting, don't rest until you've invested the time to prepare in advance for understanding what you may ask, and ask great questions. And when you're in that meeting, make sure you're sharing. It's a balance. You're sharing a little bit about you, you're asking questions, good questions, and you're taking time to listen and learn, going back to that learning to love networking for the learning aspect of it and keeping that in mind. So again, what to ask? We'll go beyond what do you do and show that you've already gotten some of the things, all of the information that's readily available online, you've already figured that out, but you want to go deeper. You want to understand more about how they've approached some problems, how they viewed some of their greatest accomplishments or their greatest challenges, and how it contributed to who they are today. So there are some great questions. One of the most popular sites that we have on our Career Resource Center website in the School of Management is 40 questions to ask on an informational interview. It is the #1 hit website that we have of all of and we have a lot of content on our site. So if you're looking for some ideas for things to ask, that's one place that you can go. Okay, and lastly, most importantly, when it comes to the best way and best practices for approaching virtual networking is understanding how to cultivate and follow up. It sounds so obvious, but so few people do it. I can't tell you how many times that people have had a great conversation. A student has asked me, what should I be doing? Should I be circling back? They had one great conversation. Absolutely. That's part of building a relationship, making sure that you're following up with people and pinging them every once in a while, giving them an update, sharing a resource, and making sure that people know that they can count on you to follow up, that it wasn't just a one and done conversation. And that builds trust and helps them want to champion you, because if that's the way that you're going to approach your networking, that's most likely the way you approach your job, and that you understand how the follow-up is critical for success. And so making sure that you're doing that, even if particularly it's to show gratitude, and if you've been introduced to someone, going back to that original person that made an introduction and showing gratitude and saying, I followed up, I spoke with the person that you recommended, and I had a fantastic conversation. I just want to let you know how much I appreciate you making that introduction. Making sure you're taking the time to do that. That's incredibly important as well, and helps build momentum when it comes to this network and that give and take that's so important. And by all means, be genuine. We started off talking about that when it comes to the reasons why you're approaching this networking. And I've heard comments quite a bit lately in this virtual environment that it's become conducive to a lot of fake networking, that there's so much out there that that I think that the way you stand out is by being genuine and being yourself and being authentic about who you are and your interest in other people. And so, and making sure it's coming from a place that is honest. And so that will help you stand out, because there may be a lot of examples right now where that may not be happening. And so, so I spent a lot of time on that slide and want to make sure that that's critically important. I'm going to turn it over to questions in just a minute, but I wanted to give you some action steps, because as you're listening to this, you may say, this all makes sense to me, that's great, but you leave here and you don't follow through. And so what I want to do is I want you to say, maybe not right this second, but when we end this webinar, please take a few minutes and write down 5 to 10 people who you would like to reach out to now. Whether or not it's people in your existing network that you haven't talked to in a while, new people that you admire, that you'd like to, take a chance and reach out to, but make sure you do it, and make sure you set a deadline for that outreach. And if you want to continue building that momentum, set a deadline and a goal for every week or every month for how many people that you're going to try to reach out to, and keep track of that. We talk now, I'm in the School of Management, and so we like spreadsheets here. And so I would encourage you, though, to keep track of the people that you're reaching out to. It will help you. You will be grateful for it in terms of understanding who and planning it out. I've seen so many people who are so planful with their job that don't take the same type of planful approach with their personal and career development and their professional development. And so if networking is one of the greatest assets that you can have, take some time to be planful, take some time to be disciplined, and take some time to build some structure around that. So set goals, write down those goals, set deadlines for yourself, and keep track of the people that you're talking with, and keep track of when you might want to reach out again, and kind of segment those people that are listed in your network, so that you understand who are critical relationships for you, who are prospective relationships that you want to continue to build. And so you take the time, you make the time to be more disciplined in your approach. And finally, when it comes to, if you're going to take another action step that's so critically important, make sure you do what we talked about before in terms of Googling yourself. Check out your LinkedIn profile, refresh it if it needs to be refreshed, and make sure that you're showing up for meetings and you're thinking about the emails. A lot of times people say that it takes longer to write a short email, but it will be so appreciated by the people that are receiving it, and a demonstration of your brand. So think about all those things in terms of the brand that you have and how you're coming across online, particularly these days. I mentioned some of the resources that are available. Never Eat Alone, Keith Ferrazzi, one of the best books that you can read about networking, really gives you some great ideas and tips about how to approach it. He wrote another book, Who's Got Your Back, that's focusing on creating some very deep trusting relationships, maybe your personal board of advisors. Startup of You, written by Reid Hoffman, the co-founder of LinkedIn, Reid Hoffman, that talks about how you approach yourself like a business, particularly a startup business, and how networking is the lifeblood of a startup, and so should it be for you. 2-Hour Job Search, I mentioned, is a great way to add some structure to your job search and really feel like you're taking time to make a plan. And there's a lot of great tips about using technology to network in that book as well. And then a couple of things, there's so many free resources right now. There's a ton of free resources on LinkedIn Learning to learn more about virtual networking, or to learn more about different skills or things that you want to add. And again, Harvard Business Review, take a look. There's so many great resources right now as well. So those are just a few of some of the things that you can take advantage of. Okay, and with that, I'll turn it over to questions.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Gwen. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to share such great information with us, and I hope we all can learn to love networking and fill in those blanks with Wish and Step instead of Wash and Soap. So I hope everyone was able to take some key takeaways and key points away from today. We do have some great questions. Yes, absolutely. Yes. All right. There's some great questions coming in here. Feel free to submit your questions too as you are thinking about anything for Gwen. The first question, Gwen, is there a relationship to being an introvert versus an extrovert in the ability to network from a virtual standpoint? Any thoughts or suggestions, any advice?
You know, there is, It's so fun. I was working on a conference, and I was in charge of the programming. So I had to hire the keynote speaker. And there was a keynote speaker that really spoke to me, and her name is Susan Cain. And she wrote a book about the power of, it's about, and she gave a great TED Talk about power of quiet. And it's all about introverts and how there's a place in terms of this type of activity, and networking is certainly a piece of that. She talks about the fact that giving a TED Talk never would have been possible for her as an introvert, or coming in front of an audience, or meeting new people, but carving out a place in this world to understand that not everybody is built to be an extrovert, and that networking doesn't have to be kind of this game or this false sense of racking up the connections. And so there's a good place for introverts to find value. And I think when we talked about, I mentioned earlier about finding your people, if you watch that TED Talk, and she has a, you can subscribe to her Quiet Revolution. I think that you might find your people in terms of, for those introverts out there. And I also, though, still recommend that book by Keith Ferrazzi, that Never Eat Alone, because it really gets to the foundation and the relationships that you're forming, and even for the introverts out there. And I have to say, I'm maybe right on the fifth, when I've done my different self-assessment tests, I'm right on the borderline. So I know for me, those things have really provided value.
Fantastic. Thank you, Gwen. The next question that's been submitted really has to do with more of the uncertain times that we're in. So the question states, now there are so many more job seekers. What suggestions might you have for standing out in today's uncertain times?
Without a doubt, following up. It is, I know that sounds so simple, but so many people don't do it. And not in a annoyingly persistent way, but particularly with recruiters, or and they've said the same thing to me in terms of standing out by showing that you've done your research when it comes to what your which is the second thing that I'll talk about in reaching out to them, but that you can follow up. Again, it's how people build trust and credibility that you're someone that is committed, and maybe committed to that particular organization, committed to that particular role. So, and following up. I will say that in this environment, and you worry even more about that black hole of job postings. So if you can, try to find, when you're applying to each job, and again, apply with, take each application in terms of quality, in terms of quantity. So take the time to say, okay, this job looks fantastic. I want to do several things. I want to make sure that if I'm able to write a cover letter, I'm writing a great cover letter that shows that I've researched that position, and it makes the connection between me and that role. I'm tailoring my resume every single time. And then ways to stand out beyond my application, I'm finding people within that organization that I can potentially connect with and find out more that helps me stand out. And whether or not you get to you have a conversation and that person is referring you or not, you will be smarter for when you have an interview, for when you have a conversation with a recruiter. You will be smarter because of the networking conversations that you've had. And so standing out by making sure that you're not just looking one-dimensionally, looking at a job posting, but you're looking to form connections. See what's out there online, see what thought leaders are found within that organization, and see if you can connect with them. And that's incredibly important. But research and follow-up will help you stand out, hands down.
Excellent. Gwen, the next question that we have here, again, really has to do with these uncertain times too. Is, as we're beginning to network and continuing our networking, is it realistic to hope for a change in career or possibly a job switch during this time?
That is such a good question, and a question that I've been asked so many times, particularly by our graduating students who had a plan, and then everything was, the whole world changed a couple of months ago. And so what happens? And I will say that in this kind of environment, when you're looking to make a significant change, that the key way to be able to accomplish that is by making sure you're knowledgeable about what you have in terms of transferable skills that are relevant to, and putting yourself in the shoes of the employer that you're targeting. And think about whether or not, if you're targeting a huge employer that has lots of applications to deal with, then, and you're looking to make a career switch into a role that they have so many applications of relevant people, and you have no relevant experience or transferable experience that's difficult to make that change, that will be a challenge. So, but maybe you can look at ways, if the organization is important to you, that you can get your foot in the door by leveraging past experience that you have. Or maybe you look at an organization, more of a middle-sized organization that may not be the most the magnet for so many applications out there, but where you might be able to really leverage your transferable skills and kind of transition into a role that you're targeting. But know as much as you can about that role. So this conversation about virtual networking, there's so many opportunities to make sure that you're educating yourself about what it really is like to live out that role. And so, and on these virtual networking conversations, ask, how does your resume look? What is most relevant? And when you get to those end of those conversations, ask if there's someone else that you can be talking with that will help get you in the right direction as well. So you continue to expand your network that way. But making a career switch, it might take a couple of steps instead of the direct step that may have been in the job seekers environment that we were in a couple of months ago. But I would say, don't sacrifice the goals that you have. Every job you take, you need to make sure that you're making progress. And so when you're learning more about and going through an interview process, making sure you're interviewing that employer just as much as they're interviewing you to make sure it's the right fit, and you're going to feel like you're making progress, even if it's maybe in a particular couple of aspects that will help you ultimately get to where you want to go.
Great advice there, Gwen. The next question submitted has to do with some of the other social platforms. Do you have any thoughts or comments on the differences in usefulness of Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook?
Yeah, I think, I debated whether or not to talk about, there's so many great places right now to join groups. I know there's Facebook groups, Twitter, absolutely. Those are probably two that are very, very relevant in terms of being able to network. I tend to focus on LinkedIn just because for me, it takes the lead when it comes to professional networking, but there's certainly great opportunities when it comes to Facebook and Twitter as well, and a lot of others that are popping up too. I was just reading a great article about so many great virtual networking platforms for women leaders out there, and remote workers. There's a number of platforms that are springing up for, all of us, or many of us, I should say, are operating in a remote environment right now. And so you may be thinking that maybe you want to continue operating in a remote environment, or how can you be successful? And there's a lot of great resources in terms of groups to be able to access for remote platforms right now. And that's where rely on your network for advice about that. And also for those that are really super targeted and relevant for you, I mean, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter, I can recommend to everybody. But when it comes to your personal circumstances, relying on your peers, your colleagues, your mentors for advice. But those are some great ways to develop affinity group networking connections that may be really helpful towards continuing to make progress in your career development.
Excellent, great. And then Gwen, going back to LinkedIn, and I think you might have touched on this a little bit too in your presentation. This attendee just wanted to get some additional thoughts or have you expand a little bit on writing or extending an invitation via LinkedIn when you have to write that message with that limited amount of characters.
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked. I will say, that and you've heard it before, and I can tell by the way you're asking that question, when it comes to virtual networking, it's definitely recommended that when you're reaching out to people that you write a personalized message. And again, you do have the ability, I know it seems like it's a short amount of time, but you do still have the ability to give some frame of reference for why you're reaching out to that person. Whether or not it's because you're an alumni connection in the same field, whether or not it's because you've seen something that they've posted, that they made a great comment. Hey, great comment you just made to the, or great post that you just made on COVID-19's effect on the energy industry. So make that comment and say, I'd love to connect with you. And so give some frame of reference. You do have the space to be able to do that. And for those of you that are looking to really amplify right now, I know LinkedIn Premium is a great way to kind of be able to leverage even more of those connections. But frankly, there's still so much room that you have to work with, even if you don't have that LinkedIn Premium.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Gwen. I know we're getting close to the top of the hour, so I just really want to say thank you on behalf of the Office of Alumni Engagement, the UB School of Management, the entire UB community. We're so grateful for your time once again and sharing all these great tips and really especially sharing those resources at the end. I know those are something we can all take with us as well. I do want to just let everyone know a reminder, we have recorded today's session and we're going to send you all the link within the next 24 hours. In addition, save the date for Wednesday, May 27th. Gwen will be joining us once again to speak on virtual interviewing, and we'll include all of this information in tomorrow's follow-up email, so you have the link to register for her next webinar with us. And also save the date for this coming Wednesday, May 20th. We're going to be joined by UB alumna Erin Rowley. Erin is the head of Science and Engineering Library Services at the University of Buffalo and serves as the engineering librarian, and she's going to share how you can access scholarly research articles when you're no longer a student with us. So just make sure you check out all of our upcoming webinars, whether it's on our website, whether it's in the link tomorrow in the email, or just by joining us and getting the information for all of our upcoming webinars. With that said, I'm going to turn it over to Gwen for any closing remarks.
I just want to thank you for having me. These are difficult and challenging times, and I just want to emphasize again that for those of you that are really kind of feeling lost in terms of your career direction, that there are so many ways that you can take control. And so attending this was a great way to do that, and I hope you continue to make progress. And so it's been wonderful having the opportunity to spend time. Thank you, Christy, for letting me join you for the past hour.
Excellent. Thank you again so much, Gwen. We're very appreciative. We hope everyone takes care. Stay well, enjoy your day, and let's all learn to love networking. Thanks, Gwen.
Okay, thanks, Christy. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.